let's segue into this Seinfeld thing and this Stern thing a little bit, because Seinfeld has been taking some hits because he's been talking about this cancel culture. But I do feel like a lot of people are very adamant to try to disprove this, even though, I mean, we have a lot of evidence to support that this was a big problem, Bisho, for many years in the last like 5 or 7 years. I mean, people getting fired. Like we could talk about Shane Gillis, but like the fact is Shane Gillis got fired right after he got hired. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then of course he had to really kill to get that career going again. Chappelle's, Louis C.K. still is not really welcome in every format in certain regards. Chappelle, biggest comedian in the world, I think at this point, maybe of this part of our lives,
Absolutely.
still can't get on a lot of TV shows because of some of the things he said. Where do you stand at this point? I don't want to be one of these people go cancel culture's over, and then like Netflix, edits the show to death next week. Do you think maybe it's progress that we do have this happening and not a complete backlash and people falling apart right away?
I think it's a couple things. One, I think there's considerably less people on Twitter than there was 2 or 3 years ago.
Which there is, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that lost some steam because it's not like you have 100,000 or let's say 5,000 people. I'm exaggerating.
Yeah, yeah.
Contacting Mars saying, if you show the fabulous Moolah on WWE, we're going to be really mad.
Yeah,
Now it'd be like 15 people or 100 people if it's trending.
right.
So, and I think companies like Netflix that would not have taken a chance on some people 3, 4 years ago and not want the heat or the bad press, they realize that a lot of people got that out of their system.
Mhm.
So I think that's the second part. So people are willing to go and let people do this shit without the fear of reprisal because it's just not as venomous. And the third, I think, is I, I think people who are willing to go along with the whole cancel culture stuff and let's stop people from saying bad things. I think most rational people that bought into that for a while, after a while, we're like, all right, come on, get the fuck on. Like, we get it. Like, we've yelled at everybody. We've told them not to do this stuff. People got taken care of. People were made examples of. Now let's move the fuck on and have some fun. Because it just
Mhm.
got to be so fucking down.
Mhm.
Like, comedy's supposed to be fun. And yeah, some people say shit that pisses people off or hurts people's feelings. But at the end of the day, it's supposed to be in the name of fun. And I
Right.
think if people can see that it's not provocateurs trying to be like anti woke and stuff, if you're good, you're good. And I think you get away with shit like these guys who are starting to rise up and have some fame now. So
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think there's a lot of factors to it.
yeah, I think it's a layered thing, but I did notice that a lot of people were falling over themselves to attack Seinfeld, about like him saying about the cancel culture thing. But I mean, listen, it doesn't mean that he's wrong, and just because he didn't work blue or super blue like a lot of his cohorts there, he was defending the craft and he puts the craft first, which ties into this thing with Stern, which is interesting to me because I used to be very close. I'm an old school Stern guy. I haven't listened to Stern in a decade plus, and I wouldn't listen to it now. And of course, but Chris Matthews is bringing up Patrice O'Neill. Um, and a lot of people like to go to Patrice in these sort of conversations. He's kind of a go-to person. Um, but apparently in Variety, because Jerry's doing a lot of press for his Serial movie, which is supposed to be an abomination, but I'll probably check it out anyway. He said Stern lacks comedy chops and has been outflanked by comedians with podcasts. And quite frankly, this is true. You know, the two bears, one cave, Joe Rogan, Tony Hinchcliffe. I mean, Shane and Matt. And we're just talking about a handful of people.
Who's
Whether
the
it's
comedian that was doing it out of his garage? Who was one of the first big ones with Rogan?
Mark Maron, but that's like
Yeah,
hundreds of
Marin.
years ago. Yeah, he started the medium really with around that time. I mean, we're just scratching the surface here. I mean, as far as comedians, because COVID forced a lot of these guys to do podcasts, and they were very, 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 very successful. You know, Stern, I think an unfair comparison here is that Stern is not really a comedian, and all of these other people are. But Jerry's not wrong. I think Stern is very old. He's in his like late 60s. He's been around for 40 years plus doing this, probably more. And he sort of folded the irreverent tent, right? And sort of went back on basically the things that made him, famous with people, and because he was just making so much money. I mean, my God, Stern's worth fucking, he's a billionaire probably. Um, But, you do have, whether it's Come Town or fucking we've been like, and then we just mentioned a few here. There's so many comedy podcasts, B show. Like Tim Dillon was one of the first comedians that wasn't super famous, making 60 grand a month in Patreon. He's probably making fucking 300, 400 grand in Patreon now, B
Yeah,
show.
that's where Schultz came from too. Schultz
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 podcast.
was
Yeah.
famous for or not Twitter, with social media beef with Chappelle, because Chappelle pretty much said there's these guys out there that got over on podcasts that don't know how to do stand up.
Mm,
I think Schultz is kind of funny with some of his stand up, but I can't argue with Chappelle on that notion because him and Tim Dillon's funny too.
yeah.
But Schultz was a guy that saw the wave and he saw that he could do certain things on social media to get attention and then
Yeah.
use that to parlay into making his stand up career work.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And by the way, these guys are good. Like they're like I don't listen to most of them, but these guys are good. You know what I mean? Like their shit is funny, Dan Soder, who else is that? I always forget his name. Luis Gomez and those guys, they do that comedy tour, that irreverent comedy tour. I can't remember the name of it.
They had the bonfire on Sirius. I can't think of Jay
Well, they have
Oakerson,
their
new
own
guy.
thing now too. I forget what it's called. Somebody can G check me on that, but
Yeah.
it's a touring thing that sells out everywhere it goes. You know what I mean? Kreischer, Tom Segura. Tom Segura has a podcast with his wife that's very popular. Nikki Glazer has a podcast. I mean, it's just on and on and on. I think Stern is passe because while Stern is asking Kate Hudson why she's so pretty, almost like a Fightful reporter, asking, Brandy Rhodes, like, why is she so pretty? Legion of Skanks. Thank you, Mr. Isaacs.
There you
Legion
go.
of Skanks is super, super successful. Legion of Skanks is super successful. These people aren't household names. They're not signing autographs at the mall, but they're selling out everywhere they go. There's waiting lists for their shit. They do carnivals and conventions. Like Kill Tony goes from doing a small room to doing it in front of 10, 15,000 people sometimes.
Kill Tony is doing MSG.
Schultz just did 2 nights at MSG.
Jesus Christ.
Schultz.
Do you
Last year
remember
he
when
was at Radio
MSG, like
City.
with Dice, was a huge deal when Dice did MSG or Dane Cook or any of these
Yeah,
guys that got really
Dice. I
big?
remember when Kinnison did it when I was
Yeah.
just got out of high school. They wanted to do a Kinnison versus Dice at MSG in
Oh
'89.
shit.
Can you imagine what that would have been like?
That would have been
Um,
amazing.
yeah, like MSG was like, Seinfeld wasn't doing MSG back then. Like, you know what I mean? It's just like, look, these guys are popular. They're, the guy, Matt Rife was before he got in a little bit of trouble there. He was selling out, not arenas, but he was selling out theaters, giant theaters. You know, it's the power of the podcast. Seinfeld at least has the same mentality as these guys to recognize that these people are doing funny shit from their house and it's trending. And then they escalate from the clubs to the fucking, theaters, possibly to arenas. Dude, Bert does arenas. Bert Kreischer does arenas. I mean, like every one of these guys does arena. I wouldn't be surprised if Legion of Skanks one day does MSG. I'm not even fucking kidding.
Oh yeah.
Tim Dillon's selling out everywhere. He could do like 10,000 maybe in certain markets. Wrestling AEW doesn't do this. A shit ton of big bands don't do this, B show.
Cat Williams was just in Cleveland. I got a notification on my phone that
He
he was
didn't
going to
do
be
the
there.
arena by me. He did the arena, but I don't think it was close to sold out. But he did an arena.
No, but still, consider the fact that AEW is running arenas that are 10, 15,000 seat buildings and they're putting 2,500 people in them. And you got Cat Williams, a comedian, running this shit. Or you got, like we've talked about, these other guys in
Yeah.
MSG, which MSG for a comedy show is
Oh,
what, 11, 12,000 easy?
more than that, I would say maybe because it's a comedy show. I'd say it's supposed to 14,000. Because remember, it's a small state. It's not, you don't have the setup there like you do for a fucking basketball game. It might be like 16,000.
Well, a lot of times, yeah, they do the round stage in the middle too. I know Dane Cook used to do that.
Yeah. And as unfunny as he was. So yeah, I think Jerry called Stern out. I'm sure Stern's going to take it poorly, like a wrestling podcaster. And but the reality is, Stern didn't have to go out there and grind that way. He grinded on really free speech, and he grinded on getting canceled and threatened and kicked off the air, and he's a hero for that, I think, for a lot of people. But as far as how he ended up versus how it made him famous, like Jerry's been Jerry for 40 years. Howard has been 3 or 4 different people, at the very least 3, and the one he's been for this century sucks ass, completely sucks balls.
Yeah, I couldn't like comprehend in my head that he was on like America's Got Talent, and
Yeah, really weird.
he's interviewing politicians like, "Oh, why are you so great? Why are you so great? You're
Yeah,
so
yeah,
amazing."
yeah, like
And
a
he used to
wrestling
be the
person.
guy that would be like, "Oh, hey, honey, what's your name? Where are you from? By the way, can you take off your pants?"
Yeah,
Like
take off
that
your
was
top.
him.
Yeah, take your top off.
Yeah,
Yeah,
doing like
exactly. Yeah.
anal ring toss with the Iron
Lesbian
Sheik.
dial-a-date, like, gay chicken, like, the OG Whack Pack. I mean, I'm a Stern fanatic from that period. I had it on. I bought Sirius just to have it on in my store. I used to have to shut it
Wow.
off when my kids came in. It was very annoying, even though, you kind of want business. But listen, comedy's doing well. I think a lot of people are hyper focused on the shitty, like left leaning comedians that are kind of trash. There's a lot of really good people doing stuff. And there's people doing stuff that in a big way. But yeah, I remember like a lot of people probably grew up with Stern being a very different Stern, I'm sure. People always bring up Carlin. Carlin's been gone for a while. There's a lot of differences here. And the E Network, Drew Yari, absolutely. I had the E Network. I used to pay for the Stern pay-per-view channel. When the E Network was like a watered down version of the uned. I still have the VHS from his New Year's Rotten Eve where we had a party at our house with like 100 people at it watching that shit.
Oh, no shit.
Oh yeah, New Year's Rotten Eve. I paid $50, I think, for that. I think everybody chipped in like $5, and it was a crazy part. It was like a hardcore gangster fucking party in like the early '90s, crazy shit. People bring up Bill Burr. He's been doing arenas for a long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think comedy's alive and well. I just think it's alive and well in the podcast medium, and people are showing up for it live. That's for sure. But yeah, I mean, it's a very encouraging thing to see.